I've always been a night owl, which is why working the graveyard shift never really bothered me, until it did. I used to think the horror stories about working nights were exaggerated. You know, the usual ghost stories, strange noises, the feeling of being watched. But after what I experienced, I know better. I used to work as a security guard at an old hospital that had partially shut down years ago. Half the building was still operational, while the other half was abandoned, off limits. But during my rounds, I always felt like I wasn't alone in that empty part of the hospital. One night, I was doing my usual patrol when I heard what sounded like faint whispering. It was coming from the abandoned wing. I knew no one was supposed to be there. With my flashlight in hand, I cautiously made my way toward the noise. The air felt thick, heavy, like I was walking into something unseen. As I stepped into the hallway, the whispering stopped. I stood there, scanning the corridor with my light. The walls were peeling, the floor dusty, and everything was eerily silent. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow move, only there was nothing to cast it. A chill ran down my spine, but I forced myself to investigate. I followed the hallway to an old patient room. The door was slightly ajar. I nudged it open with my foot, shining my light inside. The room was empty, except for a single rusted wheelchair facing the wall. Then, the wheelchair moved. It turned slowly, creaking as it did, until it faced me directly. My breath caught in my throat. The air was suddenly ice cold. And then, a whisper right behind me, "You shouldn't be here." I ran. I didn't look back, didn't care what it was. That night, I requested a transfer. Some things aren't worth explaining. A few years later, I picked up a job working nights at a 24-hour gas station. Most nights were uneventful, just the occasional drifter or late-night trucker. But one night, I had a visitor I'll never forget. It was around 2 a.m., and I was the only one on shift. The convenience store was empty, and the road outside was dead. I was restocking some shelves when I heard the door chime. I turned around to greet the customer, but what I saw made my stomach drop. A man stood there, except something was off. His clothes were outdated, almost like they were from the 1940s. His skin was pale, almost gray, and his eyes. They were completely black. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice shaky. He didn't answer. Instead, he smiled, a slow, unnatural grin that sent chills through me. Then, he walked past me and headed straight for the drink coolers. He stood there for a long moment, just staring at the rows of beverages. I glanced at the security monitors behind the counter, just to get a better view of him. But he wasn't there. The camera showed the store completely empty. I looked back. He was gone. I never heard the door chime again. I checked every aisle. Nothing. But then, from behind me, I heard it, that slow, deliberate whisper, "You shouldn't be here." I spun around, but there was no one. The store was empty. The air smelled like something rotting. I don't remember much after that. I must have blacked out. When I came to, the clock read 4 a.m., and I was behind the counter. Alone, I quit the next morning. My last night shift job was at a distribution warehouse. It was a massive building, filled with endless rows of towering shelves stacked with inventory. At night, it was unsettling. Just me and the hum of the lights. One evening, I was loading inventory logs into the computer when I heard footsteps echoing down the aisle. I assumed it was one of the other workers, but when I called out, no one answered. I grabbed my flashlight and went to check. As I turned the corner, I saw a figure at the far end of the aisle. It was tall, unnaturally thin, its limbs too long. It stood motionless, its head slightly tilted. I blinked, and it was closer. A jolt of panic shot through me. I stepped back, my hands shaking. The figure twitched, its movements jerky, unnatural, and then, it ran at me. I don't remember screaming, but my coworkers said they found me passed out in the aisle, my flashlight shattered beside me. Security cameras didn't capture anything, just me collapsing on my own. But I know what I saw. That was my last night shift job. I don't care how good the money is, nothing is worth being alone in the dark with things that shouldn't exist. I know now, some places, some hours, aren't meant for the living. I never believed in the supernatural. Ghosts, demons, and all that nonsense were just stories people told to scare themselves around campfires or to explain things they couldn't understand. But that was before I took the night shift at Crestwood Memorial Hospital. Before I became a part of something I still can't fully explain. Before I met him, let me start from the beginning. It was the summer of 2022, and I was desperate for work. Fresh out of nursing school, I needed experience, and Crestwood Memorial was the only place that would take me. The pay was decent, and the hours, well, they were brutal. The night shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 5 days a week. I figured I could handle it. I was young, ambitious, and ready to prove myself. The hospital itself was an old building, tucked away on the outskirts of town. It had been around since the 1940s, and it showed. The walls were a dull beige, the floors squeaked with every step, and the fluorescent lights buzzed like angry insects. The staff called it the graveyard, not just because of its age, but because of the stories. I didn't pay much attention to the rumors at first. Every old building has its share of ghost stories, right? But the other nurses warned me. They said the night shift at Crestwood was different. They said strange things happened when the sun went down. I laughed it off. I shouldn't have. My first night was uneventful. I spent most of it shadowing Sarah, one of the senior nurses. She showed me the ropes, how to check on patients, administer medication, and handle emergencies. The hospital was quiet, almost eerily so. Most of the patients were elderly, and they slept through the night without issue. You'll get used to the quiet, Sarah said as we sat at the nurse's station, sipping coffee. But don't let your guard down. Things can get weird. I raised an eyebrow. Weird how? She hesitated, then shook her head. You'll see. I didn't press her. I figured she was just trying to mess with the new girl. By the time my shift ended, I was exhausted but relieved. The night had gone smoothly, and I felt like I was starting to get the hang of things. Little did I know, the real horror was yet to come. It was my third night when I first saw him. I was making my rounds, checking on patients in the East Wing. The hallway was dimly lit, the only sound the soft hum of the air conditioning. I was halfway down the hall when I felt it, a cold draft, like someone had opened a window. I turned, expecting to see a door ajar, but there was nothing. That's when I saw him, at the far end of the hallway, standing in the shadows. Was a man. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a long coat that seemed to blend into the darkness. His face was obscured, but I could feel his eyes on me. Watching, my heart skipped a beat. Can I help you? I called out, my voice trembling. He didn't respond. He just stood there, motionless. I took a step forward, my instinct screaming at me to run, but I forced myself to stay calm. Sir, are you lost? This area is restricted. Still no answer. I reached for the radio on my hip, ready to call security, but when I looked up again, he was gone. I stood there for a moment, frozen in place. Had I imagined him? No, I was sure of what I'd seen. But where had he gone? I shook it off, telling myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Lack of sleep, stress, whatever. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Over the next few weeks, strange things started happening. Patients would complain about hearing footsteps in the hallways when no one was there. Equipment would malfunction for no reason. And then there were the disappearances. It started small, a pen, a clipboard, things that could easily be misplaced. But then it escalated. One night, a patient's 4-bag went missing. Another night, an entire wheelchair vanished. The staff was on edge. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said the hospital was haunted. Others blamed it on a disgruntled employee. But no one had any answers, and then there was him. I saw the Watcher again. And again. Always in the shadows, always watching. I tried to convince myself it was just a figment of my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was real. One night, I decided to confront him. It was around 3 a.m., the witching hour. I was making my rounds when I saw him at the end of the hallway, just like before. This time, I didn't hesitate. I marched toward him, my heart pounding in my chest. "Who are you?" I demanded. "What do you want?" He didn't move. I got closer, close enough to see his face, or rather, the lack of it. Where his features should have been, there was only darkness, like a void. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. "What the hell are you?" He tilted his head, as if studying me. Then, in a voice that sounded like it came from the depths of hell, he spoke, "You shouldn't be here." Before I could respond, he was gone. I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I went to Sarah, hoping she could explain what was happening. To my surprise, she didn't laugh or dismiss me. Instead, she looked terrified. "You've seen him too," she said. I nodded. "Who is he?" She hesitated, then sighed. "No one knows for sure. But the stories. They say he's been here since the beginning. Some say he's a former patient who died here. Others think he's something else entirely. Something not human." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What does he want?" "No one knows. But people who've seen him, they don't last long." Her words hung in the air like a death sentence. It was my last night at Crestwood. I couldn't take it anymore. The fear, the paranoia, the constant feeling of being watched, it was too much. I was in the storage room, gathering supplies, when I heard it, a soft whisper, like someone calling my name. I turned, and there he was. The Watcher. This time, he wasn't in the shadows. He was right in front of me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. He reached out, his hand cold as ice, and touched my face, and then nothing. I woke up in the break room, my head pounding. Sarah was sitting next to me, looking worried. "Are you okay?" she asked. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I was. "What happened?" "You passed out," she said. "We found you in the storage room." I didn't tell her about the Watcher. I didn't tell anyone. I quit the next day. It's been a year since I left Crestwood, but I still think about him. The Watcher. I don't know what he wanted, or why he chose me. But I do know this: he's real. And he's still out there. Sometimes, late at night, I feel that cold draft. I hear the whispers. And I know he's watching, waiting.